Good morning. Welcome to the first Friday entrepreneurship call. We are so pleased to have you today. The purpose of the calls is to increase the local community's knowledge about the experts, education, and economic resources that are available to help small businesses and the entrepreneurs and the towns that love them. Entrepreneurship can't happen in a town without good housing. And so a town can't be a town without housing. So, I saw something for those of you who follow Seth Godin's daily columns. I saw something this week that kind of reminded me of the messiness of local communities. And so here it is. It's a quote at the beginning and at the end. This one is a little longer. Seth Godin says, industrial systems thrive on predictability. It smooths out the supply chain, it improves efficiency, and makes many of the participants more comfortable. Tomorrow is like yesterday, but perhaps a little faster or cheaper. But breakthroughs, creativity, and human connection don't come from predictability. They come from unpredictable interactions with unknown ideas and voices. All big ideas come from left field. But if you spend your time looking at left field, they'll come out of right field. Chaos is uncomfortable, particularly if you've been indoctrinated in the industrial mindset. But if the right people and the right conditions are present, chaos creates possibility. Do it with intent. And that's by Seth Godin. And I just think that we need to remember that while the world feels chaotic, there are still opportunities here. And I am convinced that if we decide to do it with intention and with each other, we can do anything. Remember that we encourage partner sharing after our speaker is done. But we might actually run up against the deadline today. If you can't stay with us, leave when you need to. The recording will be available, but Julie's got a lot to say and she'll be available afterwards for anybody that wants to stay and ask questions. But I'm just going to warn you right now, we might take 60 minutes for Julie's presentation. So without further ado, Julie Lyon is the former mayor of Stafford, and she's going to tell us how she used privately funded land banks in her community to develop housing. So Julie, the floor is yours. Oops, you're muted. You're muted.
I sure was. Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. I love talking about housing. I love traipsing through housing. I like asking people if I can go look at the empty house next door. And that's how a lot of this started. I was a community volunteer, much like Carla. I consider myself a rural advocate, and housing is one of my passions. So I enjoy it. It's what I would rather do over anything else. And when I found myself in a small community after traveling the world literally for 4 years, it was not ideal. It's not what I wanted. And I knew that I could do something to make a difference. I didn't know exactly what that looked like. It didn't start with housing. I started with the local library, got on the library board, redid the library, and thought, well, that was a lot of fun. Now what? And so I had been seeing blippets about land banks, didn't really know anything about it, but knew that that was something that I wanted to learn more about. And so I did. I don't really have the gene in me that tells me like, you can't do this. So sometimes that works in my favor. And sometimes it gets me into situations that I don't understand how I got there. So it's just the way life works. So this was one of them. And I always preface things. This is just me. I'm very blunt. I say things the way they are because sometimes we need to hear that. We get into this world where we kind of sugarcoat things and make things nice and don't want to upset people, but sometimes you just need to tell the truth. And we are all If you're on this call, I'm sure that you're facing very similar situations or conditions that I was. So I would like to share my screen and go through this. If you have questions, maybe type them in the chat and we can address those towards the end. I'm going to try to cover a lot, and there's a lot more to cover. We could talk about this until 8 o'clock tonight, but I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And this is all just things that I've been personally involved with or no. I've had the fortune to visit multiple towns, multiple counties, and talk with them about land banks. It's very exciting for me to be able to see some of these other communities having some initial success or at least some movement forward, because not everything is going to be a success, but if we can start and move forward, that's a step in the right direction. So to cover some of the initial questions that may have, people ask, what is a land bank? I have a lot of people that think it's like literally a financial bank. And I wanted to reference and have this slide so it's available later. This is just the very basic statute telling you what a land bank is, what it can do. They are fairly easy to establish. It's just an ordinance that has to pass. However, doesn't necessarily mean that everything is going to be easy after that. Even getting your city council on board to establish a land bank is not an easy process. So while the actual activity itself may be, all of the things behind it are not. So really, the land bank is just a tool to help convert problem properties. And that could be whether it's problems with dilapidation or with title, deed issues, back taxes, liens, assessments, all of that stuff. Once the land bank is established, they are granted authority to do multiple things. The big one is acquire property. You can do that in a multitude of ways, which some of those I'm going to cover. And then the benefit to having a land bank is really two things. And you can read these, but doing them is different. So the land bank properties are abated with taxes. So you do not have to pay property tax while the property is in the land bank. And number two, which is most important, is the land bank has the ability to determine what the best use is and who's going to do that. Where if, let's say, a city owned a property and they were to put it up for sale, they have to take the high bid, regardless of who it is or what the intended use of the property is. Land banks have the ability to determine, how they would like to see it done, and not necessarily do the highest price, but maybe if there's a better plan for intent, then they are able to utilize that person to make things go forward instead of the highest bidder. I say that it's important because I think all of us have that one person in town, and everybody is probably thinking of the name of that person in their town that hoards properties, doesn't do anything with them, has enough money to do whatever they want to do, but doesn't do anything. And those tend to be, what we refer to as slumlords or hoarders or whatever. But sometimes if you can control what they can control, that's for the better of the community. So I've had a lot of questions over the past couple of years about boards. So if they're in red, you'll see the land bank shall be governed by a board of trustees, and the governing body, which is the city governing body. If it's a county land bank, it would be the county, but the governing body may appoint the board. City governing body members may serve on or as a board of trustees. That's a big deal because there is a mix across the state of communities that have their city council is their land bank board, and then there's some that have outside boards. It is completely up to you. It's going to be what is best for your community to move forward. Sometimes your city council has enough on their plate and they don't want to deal with housing. You may have a great group of volunteers that wants to make a difference, and maybe those are the ones that are going to put the time and effort into making things happen. So there's really flexibility in how the board is set up, whether it's city council or an outside board, and it's going to be whatever's best for your community. I had an outside board. My city council was willing to pass the ordinance, but did not want anything to do with land bank further than that. So we had an outside board, but I know many towns have a council that is their land bank board. So either there's not a right or wrong answer. It's whatever's going to be best for your community. In thinking about that, I do try to include voices of all people. So I had reached out to people that I knew that were interested in what I was doing, people that needed housing. I had a realtor, a landlord, I had a hospital administrator, a mom, a local mom, and a community volunteer, basically, to make up my board. And it was great. We were way more productive in our land bank board meetings than in my city council meetings. So it was fun. It was energetic. We got to talk about things and feel like that we made a difference. Every meeting we had, we moved forward. So that was really encouraging. When we first started, we had looked at a number of properties and had found one that was a 1-bed, 1-bath house that was available for purchase for $6,500. And it would have been a nice, easy project. I say easy, nothing's easy. But instead, we decided to start with this huge house, and we had asked about it. This has been sitting empty for, it was over 15 years. I say 15 because I'm not sure if it was 17 or 16, but it was over 15 years, and had just been sitting there, had a window that got knocked out one day. And I noticed and was like, who even lives there? So I started asking a lot of questions and found out that nobody lived there. Nobody had lived there for a long time, but they did still pay minimum utilities. This house is massive. It's 2.5 stories. It has a partial basement, and it was in disrepair, but nobody was really willing to step up and say, you need to come fix this, or there's going to be consequences. And this is one of the things that we can talk about later, is how do you enforce code enforcement in small towns? My town was less than 1,000 people, and many of these rural communities that we're dealing with are towns of less than 1,000 or very small communities that don't have staff to do enforcement. It was going to be expensive to fix up, but it was also going to be expensive to tear down. If it would have sat for a little bit longer and the roof would have started leaking, that house would have had to come down, and the owner wouldn't be able to afford that. The city, it's not their job until it becomes, a health hazard or a safety issue. And so if the city was going to have to take it down, it was going to be expensive. It's very intimidating to think, I bought this big house and now I have to fix it, not knowing what all is going to be involved in there. And you think this is a historic house. It was a block out of our downtown district. And this is what people saw when they came to town for festivals and activities. And so instead of spending all that money to tear it down, I thought, why don't we spend the money to fix it up? It would be a beautiful house for somebody. If nobody else has the capabilities, this is something that the land bank can take on and move forward with. And so we made this purchase. They voted on it at 9:00 in the morning. And at noon that day, we got offered a free house, which we will get to. So this was our big project, and we were very excited about. Now, one of the things that we have had to deal with in every house that we've touched is trees. That is an expense that we never budgeted for and realized really quickly that we needed to. This one had a tree that was growing into the back roof. And so if we wouldn't have taken it down, that's where the deterioration would have started very quickly. So this window has been repaired and we've gone through, but this is how the house was when we went in. I was amazed. It has beautiful woodwork. The house is in, the walls and everything are in great condition. It literally looked as if somebody had walked out the door, went to work, and then never came back. Even the china was still in the china cabinet. It was amazing. The inside of this house is beautiful, and it was just sitting there rotting. And that, it broke my heart. So we have control of this now. I should say that not we, the land bank has control of this house now, and we'll be able to do something amazing with it. So I'm very excited for that. This was our second property that we obtained. This was a mess. I should stop and say we received $125,000 from a $125,000 moderate income housing grant from KHRC. Amazing. They are amazing to work with, but my city council wasn't willing to fund anything. The grant money was literally the only money that we had to do anything with, and we needed to complete 3 projects with that. So this house I used to write a letter of recommendation for our grant. The lady that was living there was paying $60 a month in rent, which is crazy. There was no heat or air in the house. And so this is where we see a lot of cyclical events, at least I did in my town. Her utility bills would be $900 a month. She couldn't afford to pay them. They'd shut the power off, and then Ministerial Alliance or somebody would come in, pay the bills, and then she'd have another month of heat with her kitchen stove, and then they'd get shut off. And at some point, you just got to say, what's happening here? Why do we keep doing this? Why is she living there if she can't pay her utility bills? And why are her utility bills $900 a month? And then you realize, well, it's not an inhabitable house. She shouldn't be living there. There's no enforcement of, landlord responsibility or anything like that. The owner couldn't afford to do anything with it. It was the house that she'd raised her kids in, and she'd moved on because it wasn't livable. And $60 a month to her meant a lot. And so I had a conversation with her and was like, what can we do to remedy this? How much would you sell this for? Would you sell it? And it was not reasonable. She wanted a lot of money for this house because it had value to her. It's where she raised her kids. It was sentimental value that she was trying to charge for. And I had to explain to her basically, like, this isn't inhabitable. We can't keep doing this. The city's going to have to crack down if we don't make a change. when I explained to her what the land bank could do for her, if she were to work with us, we would be able to get her out of the back taxes that she owed, which was weighing heavy upon her. The city had mowing assessments that we could negotiate further down there. I didn't make any promises, but we could talk about that. It was a lot of work and conversation. When the tenant moved out, she came to me and said, okay, now what can we do? And what we actually did when I walked through the house, behind this enclosed porch here were some windows that were the exact same as these right here. And so we purchased the windows out of this house to repair the broken windows on the first house. And we bought those for $1,500 because they're antique and we needed them. She did not. She turned around and signed the deed over to us, donated the property to us, and we were able to take it and move forward. So not the best picture there, but we did salvage what we could. We actually had people come. We made $450 by selling the siding and windows and stuff out of that house that people just wanted to salvage. And we're able to put that into our land bank. And then the city demoed the house free of charge. So we now have 2 big lots right there that are available for development. And it looks much better. This was on Broadway, one of our main streets through town. Way better appearance. When I said that the day that we bought the big house, we had a house donated to us, this is it. And so you can see there, this had been a family house. It had been lived in recently. It was sitting 1.5 miles north of town, approximately. And there is a house over on this side that was wanting to expand because that's where the new generation lives, and the house needed to be bigger. So Dad didn't want to see his family home torn down, and the son wanted to add on to his house, and it made a conundrum. What do you do? And so they had tried to give this house away. Once again, it was a lot for somebody to take on just as an individual. It was a lot because it was going to have to be moved, and that's intimidating. It was in great shape, so I'd hate to see it be torn down. We went and looked at it. This is actually one of the best houses that we had seen. Structurally, it was in good shape. Walls were good, windows were good. It was in the wrong spot. Otherwise, it could be lived in. And so we made the decision to take the donation and get to work to figure out what we were going to do with it. Fortunately, we had been through and had talked about tax sales and the importance of them and what you could do with properties there. We had obtained 2 properties on Main Street in Stafford and decided that we were going to move this house to those properties. So there had been 2 houses sitting right about where this basement was. We ended up digging a full basement because a 4-foot stem wall was going to be $25,000, I think, and a full basement was going to be $33,000. And so we took that house and turned it from a 2-bedroom, 1-bath into a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house by adding the basement, therefore creating value in the house itself and having a much better appearance on Main Street. And so I wanted to include this because I'm not sure if you can see them over here or a little better here. This is very, very personal to these people. They're good family. They were happy to donate it. They've done a lot of work for the community, and you can tell this was something big for them, and their legacy is just moved. It's just moved down the street. But looking at what was to what could be, I think is exciting to see the difference there. We literally picked it up and moved it. We had under house movers out of Canton come. It cost us $16,800 to move the house. And it was impressive. This was great PR for the land bank. However, I just want to warn people, moving a house is not it's not as easy as you think. So this is where we put it. And when I first started talking about land banks, I think about going to Sylvan Grove and talking with Kelly and Stacy and Jenny and all these, having dreams. And I had pictures that I had printed off and taken with me. And this was one of them. This was 300 North Main. This is what had been sitting there for how many years? A lot of years. And I think it's important to realize this. Here's summer when it's all overgrown and the grass hadn't been mowed and the roof's still falling in and it still looks bad. The front door was completely open. The city tore those down. We were able to put this basement there, but politics and communities, I still have people that say, well, it doesn't look that great or whatever. And I'm like, did they forget what was there for all of those years? People do. People forget very, very easily. So we got the house set up and it is sitting on its foundation. I don't have an updated picture, but it was a huge change for Main Street. It was a very good thing for the family, and they're still very proud of the house that they grew up in. And it's very visible that now we have a land bank and this is what we can do. This spurred other activity by us moving this house. This property we acquired, it was donated to us. And I just am going to be frank, this is how this worked. I had neighbors that were complaining. There was people living in there, a lot of different people, a lot of activity, a lot of in and out activity, a lot of drug activity, a lot of late night activity. It was just causing havoc in this part of town. Right behind this house is a brand new house that the school built, and all around here are nice houses. And then there was this house. The more I started questioning, like, well, if she doesn't own the house, who does own the house? Because rumors were, she doesn't own it. She's just squatting there. So I did some digging and I found out that the owners lived in Ohio. And so I called them. I introduced myself. I said, this is Julie Lyon. I'm the mayor of Stafford. I've been working really hard to clean up problem properties in town. And in the most kind way I could, I said, your property's been identified as one of them. Is there anything that we can do to help? And that led to a whole conversation. What do you mean it's a problem property? And I explained, well, like I just said, there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of people in and out. The house is in disrepair. A lot of police activity. And this lady was floored. She said, I didn't know anybody was living there. Nobody's supposed to be living there, which was a whole new conversation. And so at that point, I had a conversation with her and just said, is there anything we can do? Are you willing to donate it or sell it? Here's what we're working on. Here's some of the properties that we've done. Fortunately, she had still taken the paper and she'd seen my name in the paper and knew that we were working on this. And so it was a legit deal. And At that point, they said, we would rather you have it than somebody that we don't know have it and be in there. And so I did the deed work and emailed it to them. And about a week and a half later, it showed up in the mail, and they just signed the house over to us. I made it very easy for them. It was a good thing. At that point, we had to have the tenant get out, which was less of a problem than I anticipated, but didn't come with, no repercussions. So this says, I worked hard for this house and the mayor took it from me. That was something that, I had to deal with and work through, but this is what she left us. So this was all of her hard work. And there's no way that, you can put the smell of things through Zoom, but this would be an interesting one for everybody to get a whiff of. Obviously, she was upset with me when she had to move out. And so she locked her cats in the living room for a week. And that was that. So that was a lot of fun. But we have free and clear title to this house, and it is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, plus a den/bonus room and a 1-car garage house on a corner lot that is pretty large. So there's a lot of value here. A lot of it is just cosmetic. So I feel like they will be able to do a lot with that and get it back into good shape. The land bank will be able to sell it, and they should be able to make money off of that, which will then in turn go and help with the next project. So this is my favorite house because it's done. And this was another one that had a lot of criminal activity, a lot of police activity. It was a bad situation. And the lady that lived in there was widowed and needed to move out of state closer to family and be with her family. And she needed a fresh start. And she had originally wanted $15,000 for this house when I'd asked her about it randomly, a couple years ago. And she reached out to me through Facebook and said, hey, would you still be interested in my house? I said, well, what's going on? Talked to her on the phone, and she said she needed $5,000 for it, and she was going to move to Texas and start over, which was good. And I just told her yes. And I didn't know how that was going to happen. I didn't know if that meant the land bank was going to buy it, if I could find a local investor to buy it, if I was going to end up buying it and then just figuring out what to do with it. My husband's so wonderful. I'm just going to throw that out there. Bless his heart. Because I get myself into a lot of situations. So I did an owner's and encumbrance report, which is one of the first things that's easy to do. And it costs like $125 to find out, did she even have clear title? Could she even sell this property? That was one of my questions. Knowing that she had been recently widowed, didn't know if there would be some issues with that and being able to actually get it. In that owner's encumbrance, I found that she owed $400 in child support. And so there was a lien against the house. And I was able to just say, here's the deal. We can do this. We can make this happen, but you need to pay this off, do whatever. And we walked through it in a matter of about 4 days. And we're able to basically send her off to Texas with $5,000 in hand. The house wasn't in great shape, but it was one that could have been in worse shape, I guess. The roof was fairly new, and it was intact. Let's just say that. We started right away, basically. I like the before and after things. So I have, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 pictures of befores and afters of multiple houses and properties and things. But this was a big step for us to be able to have it from, a land bank house to a house that was up for sale. We did end up, painting the trim, adding some porch rails to support the porch, put a new garage door on the front of the garage. But when I tell you that none of this was easy or without problems, when they put the new garage door on, they cut basically the structure that was holding it together. And so after we got the new garage door in, the shed wobbled where before it did not. We got it fixed, but it was just a learning lesson. So we did try to utilize as much local contractors as possible and spread our grant money out into our community. So we had new heat and air. This place didn't have any heat and air in it. They had a gas heater basically from Orscheln's in the kitchen that heated the whole house. Another dangerous situation that I hate to see. There was a chimney right here that was up in the ceiling. It wasn't supported by anything. And so it didn't look like there was a chimney there, but it could have fallen at any time. So it was important for us that we did things right. And it cost us extra money, but we don't have to worry about a chimney falling on anybody. So we tried to do things not just to make them look pretty, but so they were actually done correctly. We did not rewire the entire house because some of that was new, but you can see what a mess it was before compared to after. And that was a big deal, when we're talking about safety. And it was expensive, but it needed to be done. None of this made sense. So when you walked in the door, there was a doorway here and a doorway here, and then a doorway in the living room over here and another doorway. There was a lot. We reconfigured it a little bit, closed off this door, opened this up, made it a much more user-friendly space than before. And you guys just look at it. It's just beautiful. I love it so much. This is the result. And I'm going to walk you through some of the other pictures that we got and just the befores and afters so you can see side by side the amount of work that went into this to make it happen. It's where we open it up. I think I have a picture. When we got the house, there was a freezer and it still had food in it and it had been unplugged for a long time. It was really gross. This is another smelly one. Yeah, this is when we first walked in. There wasn't a place for this. The washer and dryer, I think there was a dryer sitting over here because it wouldn't fit in the utility room. We opened up this archway to make it wider and more user-friendly, and it just made a huge difference. We kept the upper cabinets over here, so you can see we have some open shelving. There was corn and tomato sauce and all sorts of nasty stuff just left. And this was after the house was cleaned out, supposedly, and we took possession. So we did replace the lower cabinets down here, and the upper cabinets are about the only thing left that is old. This bathroom did not work. If you were to sit here, your knees would hit the sink. There was no wall behind this, and so if you move this at all, the shower curtain would fall. You couldn't walk in there and turn around. The floor was bad. So you'll see here, we had to cut the floor out and redo the floor, took the wall heater out, and then reconfigured it. So it's still small, but it makes so much more sense, and it's just beautiful. So this is the laundry room that I was telling you about. It had this built-in cabinet. So there was a washer here, but no dryer. We reconfigured that as well. And now it is a utilizable space. Bedroom number 2. As you can see, like I said, this was after the house was cleaned out. So we had volunteers, we had our football team come and help us haul all of this stuff out to dumpsters. Gave them something to do, made them feel like they were part of something, and definitely helped us a lot. Main bedroom, you can see there was a door right here that went into the living room. We closed that off, and when this was patched, it wasn't great. It wasn't done great. Finding reliable contractors, we could have that conversation all day. But this was the answer to that. We used the same flooring that we did in the living room and covered it. And the funniest thing is when we had our open house, everybody that walked in was like, "Oh, I love that wall," not knowing that it was there to cover a bad job there. Let me see. Do I need to pause? Do I need to answer any questions, or should I just keep moving here?
Possibly. I don't have a concept of how much you have to go, but there's some great comments here. So I don't have a concept of how many more slides you have to fill.
I just have a few, and then we can have some open discussion if needed.
Yeah, why don't you do that? Because there are some good questions and some good comments to be offered.
This is one of the ways that is unique, I guess, to use the land bank. So this property right here was at one point going to be sold, and it got into a neighbor dispute. And I'll just stop at that. This neighbor over here would still like to obtain it. And even after a couple years, it was a sticky situation. And so this person just said, "We're not going to deal with this. We'd just like to donate it to the land bank." And man, I'll tell you what, it made a world of difference. It just wiped all of that away. We got that. And then the land bank traded property across the street. So we got 2.5 lots for 2 lots. And the paperwork cost $42, I think, to make all of that happen. And it was a win-win for everybody here. So a lot of land banks I see, hold property or have empty lots donated to them, and they just sit there and you have to mow them. And then city council's upset that we have a land bank and all we do is pay money to mow these properties. Why do we do this? This is an example of a success of why we do this, because we were able to work with the neighbor, and it made sense for the neighbor to have this property. And we didn't have to sell it to the highest bidder, basically. Like I'd said in the beginning, this is how things work in real life land banking. So we were able to trade that. And then when economic development was able to get funding to build 10 new houses in Stafford County, we, as in the land bank, had a property that was 2.5 lots wide that was available to build on. And so there was a drive over here. Location wise, it's next to a house. It makes sense. It could have worked over here, but I feel like then you would have neighborhood tensions, and it's literally just across the street, and it's going to work great. There's 2 other houses just like it being built around the corner. And so this whole block, hopefully, would be available for development moving forward. So this is an example of how you can remove some parties and remove some feelings and just wash everything. And actually, I feel like we're very lucky because not all of these properties are going to have houses built on them. This one just happens to. This is another recent one. So I know I had talked about going to different communities, and this got me really excited. So I had conversation with Leslie, who's the economic development director here, and had said, this motel's coming up for the tax sale. Do you guys have a plan for it? Because it is right on the highway. It is visible. It's two spots down from McDonald's. Everybody sees this property. And it's been closed for about a year. And I went to her and said, is this something that the city would want to put in the land bank? Maybe you should consider that. And she had already thought about it. So we talked through what this could look like. And I thought this is a really good example of how things could work. The city didn't end up getting it. The land bank didn't end up getting it. But I know Lincoln has a motel that's been for sale. One in Sharon Springs sold. There's one in Staff. There's little places like this all across Western Kansas. And I'll just speak to Western Kansas. And how can we help that situation? Is it the responsibility of the city or land bank to necessarily take on projects like this? And I'm sure you've heard city council people say, that's not what we do. The city's not in real estate business. And I agree to an extent, but if you're not doing anything, things aren't going to change. So maybe looking outside of the box a little bit and reconsidering. And if you have land bank as a tool, maybe it is a way that you could utilize that to make a change in your community. So this one was interesting to me. It had been valued significantly higher 3 years ago. The building's not in horrible shape. It just is not great. You can tell that it's empty and in disrepair and dated. And so it went from a significant taxing entity. Basically, they paid a lot of property taxes 3 years ago. Last year, after they closed, the property it decreased in value by half. And then it's decreased in value again since then. So the amount of property taxes that this is going to be bringing in is significantly less because it's just sitting. If it sits and goes into disrepair, it's going to be harder to bring back up in value. And so I commend her. She went to the land bank, and theirs is land bank and city council, and talked to them about this. And they were on board. They actually authorized money to purchase this as, I feel like, a safety net, because if this went for next to nothing, and in small towns, people talk, so we know there was some interest in turning this into storage units. And I just think that would just be horrible because there wouldn't be any utilities to the city. There would be no improvements made to the building. And, whoever owned it would be collecting money and not really putting a lot back into the community. So I felt that it was important that it get into good hands, and thought it was very cool that the city council agreed to kind of put that safety net in there so it didn't go for literally next to nothing. At that point, the city would have been able to write grants to help, fix up the facade or do some improvements, and then put it out for a plan for somebody to come and purchase it that was going to do what they needed to do, whether it be run it as a motel or, fix things, something to bring revenue into the town. The city or the land bank would be able to maybe dictate that a little bit. So that's just an example of, you can do commercial or personal property. I just thought it was important to share because it was a recent thing. Okay, this is where we could talk about things all day. I know many of you probably have main streets that look very similar to this, where you have old brick buildings that are all joined, all share a roof line, maybe have firewalls that separate them. This one's in Stafford. We have been talking about this for a long time. This pizza place here, which I should just throw out as like one of the top 10 pizza places in the state of Kansas, and it's amazing, is the only business within these 5 buildings that are all along here. And it's right in the middle. So the very far end building has fallen. It's been taken down, not by choice, but because they had to. The end building, the roof is completely caved in. This one is in disrepair, and this one leaks very bad. And so we've been talking about, what do we do for our pizza place? We have to protect these buildings to keep this place open and keep it protected. And no, these owners aren't doing anything with them. Even our ordinance and what we can enforce with an ordinance, we can make them board up windows, but we cannot make them repair their roof. And a lot of them just aren't going to. This one over here, this was Larned. This is a fresh one. This was just this past week. They demoed a whole bunch of buildings on their main street. And you had some property owners that were willing to put money into salvaging their building, and you had some that just weren't. They condemned them and they tore them down. And I don't know that they have a plan to put something back in place. I'm not that familiar with it, but I know that this is a reality across many of our towns. And this one here, this building, and this was a couple years ago, but it fell with no notice and it was not planned. And that's something that you're going to start seeing. I know they had one in McPherson not very long ago, that the back of the building started falling off. So many of us are dealing with these situations right here. And maybe we don't have full control of what happens to them, but we do have some tools that are maybe not being utilized. The city of Stafford recently purchased these 2 buildings that are over here so they could help maintain them. I think it was $87,000 just to get the roof to where it was going to be okay to keep. And it would have been more than that to tear down. So if they put this in the land bank's name, then they won't owe any taxes on that and would be able to sit on it while they did come up with a plan. Now, these don't have a ton of value compared to, some of the bigger buildings that are, worth more, but there's still some preservation that has to happen. And this right here had been used to just store stuff in. It wasn't an active building. None of them were active except for the pizza place. So what can we do there? That's more of a question. The one that's next door over here was owned by somebody out of Colorado. They bought it at a tax sale for $40. They went in, scavenged what they wanted out of it, had no intentions to do anything else with it, and then wouldn't respond to letters from the city for code violations or anything like that. Once they put a letter to them saying that they were going to tear it down and put a judgment against them, they signed the deed over to the city, and the city is taking this far end down, which the roof is already completely collapsed in, and will own that then. So the city will be able to help on each side there, but it's taken years for any of that to happen. Talk a lot about tax sales, and I know I've mentioned it multiple times in here. There's got to be strategy that goes into that. First of all, if your county isn't having regular tax sales, you need to have conversations with your commissioners and or find somebody to have a conversation with your commissioners to help them understand. I know it's costly, it takes time. County attorneys aren't necessarily excited to do them, but if they are done and done on a regular basis, it is much easier to maintain moving forward. After you do the first year, then you're only going to have a few properties every year. I know there's counties out there that haven't had a tax sale in 12 or 14-ish years. And you just wonder, like, what are the ramifications for not paying your taxes if you can just not pay them and then nothing ever happens? And the complacency that comes with that is damaging our small towns, whether people realize that that's an important piece of it or not. But tax sales are so important. And thinking about what properties and who gets properties and who can get properties is a big part of that. So for instance, we had a downtown lot that we had taken a building probably about this size down on, and it had $30,000 worth of demolition expense to it that was assessed to it. In going to the tax sale, we could have waived that and anybody could have bought that downtown lot in front of a church, actually. And so by strategically saying we are not going to waive assessments on this property, this property, this property, made people less likely to bid on it. If we knew that there was somebody that was going to bid and then do something with the property, at that point we had agreed to waive the assessments prior to the tax sale. So during the tax sale, they were able to announce these will be waived, or these will not. So
Julie, we're coming right on up to 60 minutes. Are you about there?
I am. Yep. These are just follow-ups and a lot of the stuff that we've talked about here. Resolution procedures for, taking down and condemning buildings, code enforcement that is so important. That community or county commissioner conversation about tax sales. You can't afford not to do tax sales. That's, if nothing else, that's the thing to take away from this. Vacant property ordinances are popping up. They are hard to enforce in small communities, and I commend those that are doing something. And the last one for future knowledge, this is something that I've got here. Insurance underwriting and land bank structure. There's a lot of different ways that you can structure your land bank. We found that insurance companies do not like to insure vacant properties. So if you have a house that you're renovating, you need to check and see if that will be covered under your city's general liability umbrella, or if there's something else that you need to do for insurance purposes there. So I could go on. I'm sorry. I could go on for days.
Thank you so much, Julie. And for those of you that are able to stay with us, we really do have some questions, and we have some excellent observations too. But I'm going to start with the questions. And so we'll try to go pretty quickly through those if you could answer fairly briefly. The first question was, let's see. Oh, I lost it already here. I wanted to start at the top about the fact that the city doesn't want to be the land bank. The city council set up a land bank in 2018, and the council doesn't want to have to do anything with it. Would we have to ask them to appoint the board?
Yes, city council would appoint, but You can do that if you have people that are willing to serve on your board and your city council doesn't want to do that. You can just say, here's a list of names. We'd like them to be, on the board, because they should, if the ordinance is in place, you should have a board.
Good. Okay. Would you reiterate where the funding came from to get the land bank up and running, please?
We were awarded a moderate income housing grant from Kansas Housing Resources Corporation. We had asked for $250,000, and I feel like we didn't get that, but we got the bottom of the barrel, and I was happy to take any money that they were willing to give to us, because my city council was not going to fund any endeavors with the land. So.
And what you got was 125, right? 125,000.
Right.
Okay.
By statute, cities can forward you money and you can pay them back, or they can just give the land banks money.
Awesome. Okay, we've got several questions about clearing old liens, and we also have an observation here about something that someone else has done. So if you'd answer what your answer would be on how to clear old liens from properties.
It's probably going to be the ones that I've had to deal with. I was able to do myself, and just because I ask a lot of questions, and I'll just keep asking until I get things figured out. There will be some fees with some more challenging ones. If your city attorney is not willing to help with that, then I would say find an attorney, and that would come out of your land bank money, basically.
Excellent. And Tiberius, I'd like to give you the opportunity, if you're still with us, to tell us what your experience has been with this.
As soon as I can figure out how to unmute, there we go.
There you go.
In Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, we didn't have a lot of problem with title issues because our tax sale was bulletproof. We had in-house abstractors to make sure everything was clean before it went to the tax sale. But in most other cases around the country, your only real alternative is to go to a quiet title action after you've acquired the property. Now that involves often a year of sitting and waiting for no one to come in and make a claim. But that's what a lot of people who don't have control of what the front end of the tax sale have no control over the quality of what comes out of the tax sale. So generally, title insurance companies won't touch tax sale properties unless you can document your process, which since the tax sale and the land bank are usually not connected, you have no control over the quality of the product you get. So the quiet title is your most common answer. Kansas City, Missouri has a nice lawyer who voluntarily does quiet title actions for new owners.
Wow.
But finding a lawyer if you don't have a lawyer, and I've never met a city lawyer who's willing to do the work, you need a private resource to do it, but it's not very expensive to do.
Tiberius, this came after your comment, and who has to make the case for that, the property owner or the land bank?
In our experience, the property owner has no leverage in looking for abatements on taxes or on the liens that they have incurred. It was only because it was the land bank approaching, in one case, the feds, who wanted $80,000 off a property that was worth $7,000 at that point. And we told them, you're standing in the way of our being able to redevelop this property. But it was conditional with them that the city was getting the property, that it wasn't staying with the person who actually owes them the $80,000. We had that with we got the same cooperation on mechanics liens. When you show them pictures of the property and they realize they're never going to get their $4,000 out of this house that is $15,000 behind in taxes and falling down, a lot of people cooperated with us as the land bank in the city in just waiving those so they could write it off and we could move forward with putting it back in the market and on the tax rolls.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Tiberius. Stacy wants to know, how many properties have you done, Julie, and in Stafford?
We've had 3, 5, 6.
6. And the way she asked it was, how many properties have you acquired to date? Is that the same number?
I would say we've acquired 6, and then we donated the one to economic development so they could build.
Great. Does the land bank need to be a city? Can it be a county, or can it be regional?
So it is a municipal thing. However, that could be any taxing entity. And on the very first slide, I think I put on there, counties or a taxing entity can do that and are considered municipal. So you can have a county land bank.
And Tiberius actually answered that question with, in Kansas,
Did he
you
answer,
need, pardon me?
did he answer the same as me?
I think so. In Kansas, you need an ordinance from some entity to create a land bank. So a regional land bank would require multiple entities to pass that empowering ordinance. Sounds like the same answer to me. Okay, the others affirm your land bank or your tax sale. I think Simmer wants to take Tiberius's lawyer. So anyway, are there other questions or comments that we missed? It is, we did pretty well. It's 10:37. What I hear from Julie is that she stands ready to be a resource to all of us. She's happy that we've got this on videotape now so that others can watch and learn. And they will see on her slides her contact information. And I think she's happy about that. So I'm going to go ahead and close the call then with one announcement about next month's speaker. Next month, we're going to be talking about how to start a commercial kitchen with Gary Satter from Glacial Hills Rural Development Corporation, and talk some about the importance of commercial kitchens in building rural businesses. We have guests who are coming to comment about their own commercial kitchen efforts. Rick McNary, Alex Leslie, who is with the Moreland Commercial Kitchen, Leanne Saylor with the Hodgman County Commercial Kitchen, and Tandy Rendus is actually the person who runs the commercial kitchen or is the program manager, I think, for the Glacial Hills RDC. So thank you so much for joining us. And Julie, fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for sharing your passion and your knowledge. And for the rest of you who were here to share as well. My thought for today is from Maya Angelou. You can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. Thanks, and create a great Kansas day. Thanks, everybody.